the 1970s portion. You're up.
All right. So I'll start by talking a little bit about the logic of how we laid out the instrument suites. We, instead of trying to make an individually customized room for every possible instrument, we've separated them into categories of spaces. So what we call our type 1 spaces are the most sensitive instruments, the aberration corrected TEMs being our sort of flagship piece for that. So when we talk about those, these darkest blue colors, those are our type 1 spaces. And then there's a tier of instruments which are sensitive and need sensitively planned spaces but are not as sensitive. And that row, type 2 spaces here, are in the slightly paler blue. And then we have lab spaces that are what we might think of when we just say a lab, benches, fume hoods, that kind of thing, that are not as, they're not really environmentally sensitive at all. And they are the lightest blue here and up here. So the key features of these spaces, when we look at, I'll start with type 1 again. We're looking to make an extremely quiet, extremely vibrationally stable, extremely electromagnetically stable volume. And we want that volume to be flexible for as many instruments as we can. So we're building it, I don't know if you can see at the back of the room, but these rooms have sort of a double line around them. What we're showing here is that the instrument room itself is an independent box that sits on the slab and it doesn't touch anything else. It doesn't touch the structure above, it doesn't touch the walls of the adjacent rooms. So when we shield that box with electromagnetic shielding and we build a nice solid wall, the only thing we're touching is the floor. And you've heard that we've done some extensive vibration testing and we're very lucky. The floor in this building performs very well. Our goal is basically not to ruin it. So those rooms stay, hopefully, we're just capturing a very quiet environment. And the type 2 rooms, similar approach, but not quite as aggressive. So we probably don't need magnetic shielding in the walls for those rooms, and we don't need double walls on most of their sides. So you can see up here, we have a loading dock, and all down this side, those rooms get double walls. But on the other side, not so much. We trust that your neighboring instrument isn't going to be doing anything really loud. So those are both different grades of very similar environments. One of the moves we've made to try to make them perform really well is to say all the supporting equipment, all the pumps and chillers and vacuum things, UPSs, everything else that goes outside these instruments has dedicated space. So these gray spaces here, and here, and here, you put everything outside there. So I said our goal is to not ruin what's already a good thing. That's part of it, taking all the sources of different kinds of noise and keeping them outside. And then the less stringent spaces, the non-instrument spaces. So over here we have a sample prep lab. That's a fairly standard benches, fume hoods. There's going to be benchtop equipment and floor-mounted equipment. And the idea behind that is to make it as flexible as we can, knowing that this kind of stuff changes. So all those lab benches you can take away. You can put a giant piece of floor-mounted equipment, plug it into the surface on the ceiling, or you bring back the bench. We have a bench-mounted process. Having the 2 hoods gives you room for different incompatible processes. Next door here, we have a light microscopy room for other processes that are not. I feel like I also have to specify, in every other project, a microscope room is a microscope room, but in this one, microscopes are all the fun things in type 1. So those are just optical microscopes on tables here. I could talk about these in a lot more detail. I'm probably supposed to yield the floor to the office side. Unless anyone has any particular questions while I'm up here. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm just curious, are any of the rooms can be certified for biosafety level 2?
We're not planning for any biosafety level in the instrument rooms right now. Is there any bigger conversation? Do you want to talk about that, John? Yeah.
Why don't we discuss that one? I mean, we'll leave that on the docket
let's
for
look at it.
an open panel discussion. But it's a good suggestion.
Okay.
There's a question.
Question in the back here.
Sounds like you've got some flexibility in spaces, but there are certain rooms, like I'm sure the aberrated corrected T room is for that.
It is.
Is all the rooms been space claimed in terms of you guys have planned for certain piece of equipment to go there, or is there room for adding more equipment or changing it up when a decision may be made down the road.
Again, we can discuss this a little bit in more detail later, but the short answer to your question is not all the space has been allocated. So there are literal empty rooms here that have been designed with the idea of a equipment of this kind of, that needs this kind of environment to go into it, but what that is not yet been exactly decided.
Yeah, I would say a way to think about this, when we started with these spaces, we set up a matrix and just said, instead of making a list of instruments, which is the natural place to start, we made a list of space qualities. So what we're providing is a room of certain size that can take a certain heat output and maintain a certain temperature stability. And they have names on them, they have concept level equipment, but the space is specifically designed so that it can accommodate other equipment at other times.
Hey, you reserved it.
I'm sorry, just 1 second. I would emphasize that the rooms, type 2 rooms are basically over-engineered for your typical instrument like an SEM or
Yeah.
things that are less sensitive than that.
Yeah, specifically with providing that kind of headroom and capacity.
Have you reserved any rooms for processing, which is typically noisier than what I'm hearing? I know it's been a question
So-
how we deal with that,
So
but
processing will be a big part of the discussion that we
Okay.
have. And processing, just to put out lay it out, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different
Correct.
kinds of people.
Right.
But the foundation of what we've done here is something which has been of the most utility to the most number of people. And as the vision of the facility expands, I think that we need to keep in mind that we don't need necessarily to have everything exactly in this one space, and that processing can be something which we have other spaces across campus
But-
that we can handle.
but this is a space that's available and there's no other space.
So
you can
the
show.
processing that goes on in this particular space will be on the small scale of sample preparation,
Sample prep,
focused
okay.
ID, things like that.
Thanks.
Are the type 1 rooms designed to be operated from the inside, or are they
Ooh,
accessible outside?
excellent, thank you, because I missed saying that. The type 1 rooms are supposed to be operated from the outside. We have located control rooms here and here. So between each pair of type 1 rooms, there's a control room. It's a closed room, so it should be good for folks, but it's got a glass wall, so you're connected to the corridor that's going on outside.
Also, the classroom and meeting room will be equipped to be able to handle remote access of the machines too, so we can actually instruct people how to use the machines from the classroom and actually use the instruments while we're doing that.
That seems like a great segue to the office side, although, yeah.
So boundary to the office, maybe,
Yes.
prepare a thought for computational facilities, some local computation.
Yes, we do have that. Now I'm really gonna.
Okay.
But I'm glad to be so
Sorry,
popular.
before you go on, can I ask a question?
One more question.
So there's these large gray areas which are existing. I mean, there's a big
Yeah,
area at the left.
dark gray, yeah.
And then there's several rooms which are labeled as existing, sort of in amongst the core of the characterization area. Can you just briefly comment on what's in those rooms and what ones are?
So do you want to go for it? Yeah, so that one, those are existing electrical and mechanical rooms that serve the building. This one, I don't even know what I'm supposed to say about that one.
That's the battery room for the facility on the upper level.
Okay.
It's the what room?
Battery room
Battery?
backs up all the data that they use in the,
Facility upstairs.
Yeah, so we can neither look inside nor touch that room.
And then the large area to the left?
Oh, left.
Here.
Those are all other laboratories.
they're the fluid mechanics areas.
And when we talked about testing the vibration for this space and the noise, we tested it with those facilities operational. So we have some sense of what they do in the space.
Thank you.
Okay, so a little bit about the office space and just the architectural experience and the aesthetic behind the design. So we talked about the office area here being in the original 1928 building. The idea behind the design of this is that, this is a very exciting thing that Hopkins is creating with this facility and the capabilities that will be provided with it. And so our design is essentially meant to emphasize that. We want it to be exciting, we want it to be inviting, We want it to encourage collaboration between the community and industry and faculty and students and all the researchers who are using the space. And so this gray box here is the existing, essentially the core of the entry to the 1928 building. And so when you enter on the ground level, you see the lobby, there's an elevator and there's a stair that gets you down to this level. The idea is that when you enter into that main lobby, we'll have signage that clearly identifies you're in MCP, this is where you go. We are looking at doing some upgraded finishes into that elevator. For those of you who have not been in there recently, we are going to kind of update it, give it a little bit of love. This vestibule here is also existing, which we are looking at upgrading finishes to make that a little bit nicer, more inviting, because this will be the front door to the MCP space. When you enter into the area, we're planning to have an administrative person here, so this might be a receptionist of sorts, but this is kind of your greeter, so they are taking in any visitors who come in. The rest of the space this is all of your people space, and so you'll have spaces for faculty to sit over the workstation, a series of closed offices. We're calling this a multi-purpose space. It could be used for lectures, some training, maybe even a CEU from the community, along with a couple of conferencing areas and smaller meeting spaces, and some open collaboration space, in addition to the computer lab that Matthew pointed out earlier. The overall layout of this is still being massaged right now, and so it may not look exactly like this on day one when everyone moves in. But the thought is that when a visitor comes in, you kind of see everything. Everything is transparent. It encourages the sort of collaboration that we've been talking about. We're looking at doing some warm finishes and some textures, and looking at taking advantage of the existing natural light that's coming in from both the north and the south side. Brian mentioned that this does have a very kind of shallow ceiling height. It's an existing structure of an older building. And so the design of the space will definitely maximize these heights and make it feel more open. Connecting you kind of on this north side here, where we're currently showing some open collaboration space. This is kind of also the beginning of the tour zone. And so when visitors are brought in, they're greeted in the office space, but then they kind of walk along this back portion here. We're providing a new accessible lift that takes you from this level down to this level. And you enter into this quiet zone here. The quiet zone is meant to be as wide as we can get it. But the idea is that this is lined with screens. So screens that may show some of the sciences that are being studied, images that are coming from some of the microscopes. They're meant to be interactive.
I'll add to that one that I didn't mention this. Obviously, the type 1 rooms are shielded. We can't put a window in. But the type 2 spaces, we think that you can get acoustically isolated windows in. So as you come down the corridor, you can see into those spaces and see what's happening without interfering with it.
That's right. And so tucked in, Matthew also pointed out these control rooms. These aren't necessarily meant to have the people who are controlling the instruments on display, but they are kind of accessible off the main corridor. Taking you through this quiet corridor, you kind of come into the not loud corridor, but the louder corridor, where we have the support labs here on the side. And then this zone back here gets you back into the more shared corridor where it's currently being used for shipping and receiving. There's some storage of waste material, things like that. We're going to look at upgrading the finishes in there, brightening it up, kind of making it all one cohesive space.
Thank you very much. Any questions about the architectural plans? In that case, this is a nice 3D rendering.
We didn't even talk about it.
Where's the ground?
There's the whole building again.
But this is the last slide of the presentation, and what I think I'd like to do now is invite Mitra and Ken up and I don't know if the architects want to join us up in front, but the three of us, I think, will facilitate now a discussion about the future of the MCP. And the kinds of questions that we're particularly interested in are, how to engage and build an interdisciplinary community. How can you, as the larger community, play a role in the MCP? And some of the ideas that we have on that level are as an advisory board, just a friends of the MCP, the connection. The MCP, one of the things that we want to emphasize is that we're also that we should be able to help with grant center proposals, workshops, et cetera. We don't mean writing them for you specifically, but you know, I know, but that's nice. But you know, if you're writing a grant and you want to understand what the MCP has to offer for the research that you're proposing, we can help with boilerplate for the kinds of things that we're doing, and even discuss with you how what we're doing at the MCP can enhance the research program that you're proposing in the first place. So we want to really help with that, to make it a characterization innovation and hosting students in workshops, et cetera, and things like that. So with that, why don't we just open it up for questions and discussion?
We talked about governance, so who's actually responsible, right? Who makes decisions, who decides what equipment is purchased, who sets priorities, who sets user fees?
Right, and I think that's the point of effectively taking advantage of the board that's already been in existence, and I think, you know, developing a new board also that will allow us to, again, engage an interdisciplinary community and allow for example, priorities to be set, not just with user fees, but also, you know, the questions of what processing should go in. You know, what is the 2-year, 4-year, 6-year kind of plan? And so it won't all be decided from the top. I think I think engaging Chad is critical here, but engaging the community is equally critical. So, so it'll be a board plus higher administration kind of governance.
We have to convolute it with some other things like MRI proposals. There's a limited number of them on campus, and there is a campus-wide homewood facilities committee now that is helping assess, and I guess Larry Nagahara's office is helping coordinate that, you know, assess which of these proposals we should go after. And as this becomes more real, we'll integrate those kinds of facilities with the MCP leadership and make sure that everyone's on the same page and that communication is important.
I guess in terms of your future business model, obviously you'll need to charge user fees to help, you know, recoup some costs of maybe service contracts, maybe staff support. Are there any other sources of revenue you plan on doing, like maybe a industry membership type of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, I personally plan on forming an industry collaborative effort where it's, you know, effectively it's a, you know, a pay model where you either have sort of a subscription type of user fee or, you know, everyone goes into a pot, and that's fairly common across most centers, characterization and processing centers, and you know, globally. So that's something that's allowed. There's also sort of sponsorship of students that it's sort of in-kind donations and different things like that. So definitely engaging industry and hopefully donors or naming opportunities and things like that are all on the table.
Is the Dean's Office committed to any particular level of support for staff on an ongoing basis?
Yes, the answer is yes, they have committed to support of the staff salaries.
How much are we talking about? How many people?
Right.
We have, at the moment, I think we agreed on 4. Am I correct on that? Yeah, I don't remember exactly what the final account was, but it's an ongoing thing since as we expand in the kinds of instruments and the lab managers that we need, then we will address those. So right now we have, the administrative staff is supported by the Department of Material Science and Engineering. So that's Ellen and Megan. My salary, half of Phil Chapman's salary and Sam Norris's salary are being supported by the Dean's Office. And that will expand to include a TEM lab manager. And from there, depending upon how the MCP grows, we we work that out.
I think order of magnitude, it's about $500,000 at steady state.
And that, so that's for staff, or does that include also things like service contracts?
That's staff.
How about service contracts?
The model right now is that we need to generate use of the instruments to cover the service contracts.
So the idea is to cover all the service contracts from user fees?
That's an unrealistic, it's an
Yeah.
unrealistic, yeah, and everyone, and Chad, I mean, we've been discussing this, yeah, especially when you bring on tools that don't currently have the user base. So I mean, so the goals are twofold. One is to be less dependent on Big Brother, right? So basically say, okay, how can we exist on our own, and how can we be dynamic in the way in which we engage, either industry for donorships or large contracts and things like that. But as far as its steady state, we have to understand that service contracts that are $200,000 or $300,000 a year are on no campus are they covered, right? On no campus, I can assure you of that, are they covered. So yes, we want to drum up user base, and by saying we're going to divide the service contract by the number of hours is not the way to do it. So we have to be smart in the way in which we engage the community. So the short answer is we want to build up the user base to cover as much as possible. But we also want to have a steady state level of support such that we can grow and also, I think, answer the academic need of discovery. So research at the discovery phase, not just, let's use it. And so I think that's, this is something that it's really critical that we have board input here and an external advisory board. So these are the kinds of things that we don't have the answer for today. But we do have a base level support that Chad said, and I think we're going to get it. Yeah.
So I agree with what you're saying, Todd. I mean, I think that, the dean's office is essentially kind of committed to, supporting the facility at the level it needs to be supported to make sure expenses are covered. So I don't think we're fully expecting the user fees to cover those things. I mean, I don't know of any place, as you said, where that's really in fact the case. So some subsidy outside of the administrative staff is to be expected.
But we do expect to grow the user base and to attract more users in a more meaningful and constant way. So that is a goal. So while this facility grows, the number of users and the range of users will increase as well.
For the equipment that is yet to be acquired, such as the operator 50 TEM and some other instrumentation, what level of commitment do you have from the dean, WSA dean, or you're going to go to the Board of Regents, or if they ask?
So I think in our plan, we have a combination of school funds and then the anticipation of some grant funds to fund most of the equipment.
And we have ongoing discussions with equipment manufacturers to have bundles, maybe a center of excellence of some sort, things like that. And so, when it's possible that we can get a good deal, especially if the manufacturers know that this is going to be a showcase for their equipment.
One thing that was really helpful in the HEMI proposal was the commitment from the dean for the Malone building. And in that proposal, we had a wonderful rendering of what the building looked like. And I think that was a big selling point. I've seen some drawings here that are nice, but I don't think it's really the level that would really help a large consortium proposal. And there's a number of those going out. And I would love to see if your firm could produce one, a better rendering of what we have planned.
In fairness to them, and I think in reality of this meeting, we're engaging the community early on.
Right.
I mean, EYP came on in the summer.
Right.
We're not.
I'm not.
So
This is an ask. It's not a complaint. And I'm wondering if
it's a total ask.
in the next
totally in
3 or 4 weeks, 2 big proposals will go out, many millions of dollars. So if there's a way to get a better drawing or image of what we're planning, that'd be really helpful.
That's great. I love the.
Yeah.
Well, we have some congressional asks potentially coming up as well, so we would love a pretty picture
So
towards the staff.
yeah, yesterday our team kicked off sort of the look of the space, so
Mhm.
that I start to look at finishes and things like that. It's a little hard to do renderings without
Right,
doing
right.
some
I
of
think
that.
even a preliminary, I mean, I agree with
So-
you, we've even had industry, potential partners say, do you have a rendering for
Right.
me? And this is, while this is useful for, I think, for the Hopkins community, it doesn't, wow, it doesn't.
No,
And so, I agree, I think even a preliminary that might change is probably okay.
exactly.
For these
Just-
things, but it's a point well taken.
Part of our next steps in the next few
Okay.
weeks, to produce some 3D
Right.
visuals.
On the other hand,
Okay.
we didn't want to schedule this meeting after everyone felt that everything was completely set.
Well, no,
aside.
no, yeah.
So this has been useful.
Right. I had a follow-on, so I want to understand, how do we engage the P in the MCP? And where does that
We do
sit?
too.
Where's the
We do.
space? That takes a lot of space, probably more than you already have for characterization. So is there any plan for that going elsewhere, or is that going to be done on a per faculty basis?
I
Is
don't
it,
think it should be done on a per faculty basis, and I think that there's a question of bandwidth
Right.
at some level.
yep,
But just to summarize a lot of the discussions over the past few years with regards to P, from
Right.
my perspective, and perhaps I'm seeing this from a more parochial view than others, I see three major constituencies of processing on campus. There are people who are interested in traditional clean room type of processing, thin film deposition, lithography, things like that. There's groups that are very engaged in biomaterials processing. This requires soft materials, synthesis, tissue, polymers, fibers, things like that.
right.
And then there's a group that's interested in, say, metallurgical processing. And each of these groups has a valid claim to processing, and how we, as a community, allocate the limited resources that we have in regards to space and money
Right.
is an ongoing discussion. So
So there's no plan at the moment for how to deal with that, it's just a,
The plan is to make it a priority that we identify, what will be, the key piece, I think, in the center. I mean, there's been no final decision as far as
right,
what aspects
no
of,
one hasn't, we
at least as
haven't.
far as I'm understanding.
What we don't want to give is the impression that P has been ignored,
Right.
is going to be ignored going forward.
okay,
Just
okay.
because we're
Yeah.
working with characterization doesn't mean that processing is now off the table, that more of these processing things is off the
Right, but a
table.
decision's been made, right, to emphasize characterization, which I'm fine with. But
That
it,
was basically because it's an easier question to answer.
and
At first,
that's
the
fine.
near-term goal was basically, what kind of rooms do we need to get out of the way, and then let's engage the P. It was, I think
Yeah.
at least that's what, a lot of it was, let's engage, let's figure out what characterization needs there are, and,
Right.
what, as far as infrastructure is needed. I think the unfortunate reality is that it's space constrained, as you can see
Oh, yeah,
by the
yeah.
drawing. So it's
Right.
actually not just process limited, it's almost characterization limited too. It's a way in which, there's not a million different things that are going in here. I
No,
think the question
no.
is what can go in and what's meaningful as far as.
Do we have any commitment for more space at Steve, or is this it?
I don't have an answer for that.
Or elsewhere, I don't.
Well, as.
You mean more space for,
Well, there's no real room for processing right now,
There
and,
needs to be more room for
you know, so, and maybe the answer is no, and we live with what we have, but I just,
the answer is probably maybe.
probably maybe.
Well, because there's.
A double conditional.
You looked at the floor plans, there's some
Yeah.
space that's not particularly well utilized up in the kind of upper corner of the floor plan from the
Uh-huh.
In the gray
1970s
space
building.
you're talking
In the
about?
gray
In the gray
space.
space.
They could potentially, I
Right.
think, be utilized
Uh-huh.
more
That room
efficiently.
is
Do you wanna- do you wanna show?
G040. So we're talking about,
Yeah, that kind of,
so for instance, this room here has been a powder processing room used by APL over the years. It's technically under the, if it's allocated to a particular part of the university, it's allocated to the Department of Material Science. But because processing hasn't been clarified,
Mhm.
I've at least tried to keep that at bay and not allocate it to any one particular person. One thing I would like and I think we'll all agree with this, is the MCP should be growing because of communal input from the university as a whole, and not, oh, I need a place to put my furnace, or I have a piece of apparatus I'd like to buy, can you
Right.
put it in there? It's got to be a holistic vision
Mhm.
and a holistic strategy.
Right.
going forward. So that's at least some space in MCP which might be usable, within Steve, which is usable for this.
Is all
Some
the-
space will, sorry, let me just say a couple more things. Some pieces will move out of Maryland Hall, then we'll open up some rooms in there that could potentially be used for more P. And as other larger facilities maybe move out of Maryland Hall, maybe even more facilities than that kind of thing. If P is part of the strategic plan for the university and for the school, or generally, then as space opens up or is reallocated or is rejiggered around, then it becomes a priority in helping set a strategic need for the resources that we have on campus.
I guess what I'm hearing is a lot of sort of hemming and hawing with regard to the P.
Yeah.
And I'm completely willing to recognize that there may be really good strategic and practical reasons not to do the P, right?
Yeah.
But I think you would be better off, I think the community would be better off if we just made that decision and said, this is about materials characterization.
Right.
We worry about processing separately. And the reason I say that is that there's an opportunity cost for us in calling this materials characterization processing if there's no processing.
Yes.
Right.
Because the next time we go to Chad and
Yeah.
Ed and say, we need money for materials processing,
already have it.
they're gonna say, we're already spending X million dollars on
Right.
materials
Yeah.
processing. So if we're not gonna do processing, let's just say that.
Yeah.
and be done.
I'd like to
agree.
not make that decision at this meeting.
But
I
we
think-
are effectively by taking most of the spaces available for characterization,
Right,
right?
I mean, I think-
it is being made, whether
Well,
you,
so
Right,
here's the
in a
question
way.
to ask. Is the MCP limited to Steve? Right, so I think we have to think about, this is sort of an existentialist kind of question, but, is it that, we're saying the MCP as a whole is only in Steve, and that's
Right.
it, end of story, and as far as funding, as far as vision, as far as everything? Or do we have a tethered umbrella approach, which happens on most campuses? Or do we allow ourselves to continue to have MCP, including processing, and perhaps use the fact that there isn't enough space as an impetus to either expand or, so I think there's a lot, I would personally, as someone who also is interested in processing, I think that I share some of the frustration that I'm hearing in the room, that I really like to see processing integrated in a true fashion.
all right.
But what's realistic, right? So I would like your feedback. Do we think that MCP has to be housed in Steve only, or do we want it to be this sort of cloud-like
So
vision?
there's a potential advantage for putting it in Steve to the extent that,
Mhm.
if you think of processing in terms of a clean room with ion etchers and other deposition equipment, you're going to need air handlers and you're going to need basically a way to manage essentially that gas effluent somehow.
Right.
So you could argue that there's an advantage for, while you're gutting this space, to actually at least
Yeah.
incorporate the infrastructure that would enable that,
Mhm.
as opposed to doing it at significantly higher cost somewhere else at the university. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
one
good.
thing to consider
Also-
with regards to your point about potentially putting processing in
Right,
Steve. Yeah.
right.
So another question is, what is the dean's office view of this part of Steve? They're calling this MCP, whenever they're referring it to it, I guess you're referring to this as MCP, not that there's a greater activities on campus that are under this general umbrella.
No, I don't think there was ever a statement that said that the MCP was limited to Steve. That Steve was an opportunity to put in the MCP and what seemed to fit their best.